You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Knezick.
Welcome back to The Buzz, brought to you by the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I am Tom Knezick, and today we are buzzing into chapter 67 of our podcast, where sometimes we just pull a Bill Riley and say, screw it, we're going to do it live.
You know what? It's been a busy couple weeks, and I'm tired. You know, while we were setting up, we were having a few technical difficulties. And while I was waiting for everything to come online, I actually closed my eyes for a second. I thought I was going to fall asleep.
Yeah. So it took my laptop like half an hour to boot up. And then Fran doesn't know if this is actually recording or not.
It's recording now. Whether it will keep recording, I don't know. It's been shutting off.
So this might be a very abridged episode if it doesn't capture the whole thing. But
it's somewhat prepared. It's not fully prepared, but it's somewhat.
Yeah,
prepared.
It's our pets' heads are falling off. It's a lot going on over here.
Which you wouldn't think for mid-August. You know, it's busy in a different type of way.
Business-wise, it's been slow.
Yeah,
yeah. It always is. It's August.
But it's busy in a different type of way.
Yeah, definitely. But we are. So I guess I should say this. We've always promised in the beginning of episodes that we are going to keep it shorter. We are actually on a deadline now because of our technical difficulties. So I guarantee this will be maybe the shortest episode we've ever had.
I guarantee it will be the shortest episode we've ever had.
So let's stop with the chit chat and get into our That's Hot for the week.
Hot.
We should figure out beforehand who's going first.
Yeah, I know. Not. We do this every time. I think about it too.
I never know. It's like we look at it and go, oh, who's going to go first?
Yeah.
So you want me to go?
Yeah, I always tell you to go first.
All right. So this is going to tie into my listener shout out for the reason why I'm picking this plant. But my choice this week is Conoclinum coelestinum, which is blue mist flower. Now, Conoclinum used to be Eupatorium, so it's in the Joe Pye weed family. But
damn botanists
changing names again. But this one seems to have taken foot. Like people are actually using it. Yep. So that doesn't always happen. But blue mist flower is an adaptable perennial of sandy coastal marshes to drier inland meadows. Ornamental lavender flowers reminiscent. To me, it reminds me of hardy ageratum, the annual. So very similar flowers. It gets 1 to 2 foot tall. It is a facultative species, so it can take drier or wetter conditions. But part of the reason is because it can be aggressive. And this will lead into a call that I'd gotten here at work about using aggressive native plants to combat invasive plants. So, and this wasn't one that was on the list. And I realized afterwards, hey, this should be added to it because it can colonize pretty well. And I think actually, was it Patrick Gilliam?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up, how it was kind of spreading where he didn't plant it. Right?
And that was after the fact too. I had already had this prepared before he posted that. So,
and I'd been meaning to respond to him in our Facebook group and say that I planted a ton of it actually my wife planted most of it in our garden out front, and it does not grow where we actually planted it. It is like all in different spots. It's there, but it's not where we put it originally.
I like that. I like the fact that it finds where it wants to be.
Definitely.
And I love that. But birds and butterflies both love it. Flowers July, kind of almost through November, and it is native to 27 states. So mostly the Midwest to the East Coast. I don't think it's really found on the West Coast, but that at least hits half of you.
Yeah.
half of the states can use it. So that's my choice.
All right. Good choice.
Thank you.
So my choice for this week, and will come as no surprise if you follow us on social media, because I made a couple videos about it, and that is Rudbeckia fulgida, and I believe this one's variety fulgida as well. And I'm
going to be honest. I've seen that forever, and I've never once asked what's the difference between Rudbeckia fulgida and Rudbeckia fulgida variety fulgida. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't either. But we call it orange coneflower, and this is where we go back to our warnings about why we don't like to use common names. we like to use the botanical names is because one of the other common names you'll see for it is black-eyed Susan or perennial black-eyed Susan. And we call that Rudbeckia hirta. It was our black-eyed Susan.
Before I started working here, Rudbeckia fulgida was black-eyed Susan to me, not Rudbeckia hirta. So, and that flip-flop for me once I started working here. But it is a very odd, because there's so many Rudbeckias that have that black center. Yeah, I think just across the board, they just get labeled black-eyed Susan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and I've heard Rudbeckia triloba called black-eyed Susan. I've heard a bunch of them called black-eyed Susan.
And that's why we need the botanical name.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And I even had a retail customer who had to ask me because I had gotten, I work with Pinelands Nursery and I work with Sunset Farmstead on plants, and I had some perennial gallons of Rudbeckia fulgida, and on the label it says black-eyed Susan. She's like, so which one of these is actually the black-eyed Susans and which one's the orange coneflower? I'm like, okay, this one's what we call orange coneflower, but because it's if you buy smaller sizes, it's Pinelands Nursery, larger sizes on it's Sunset Farmstead, so I have to keep both.
All right, listen, I'm going off topic for a second.
Timeline, Fran, timeline.
All right. But I'm laughing because we're talking about common names, but I got a phone call here at Pinelands today, and I was referring a customer to you at Pinelands Direct, and they were really upset. They really wanted to buy from us. They're like, I'm local. I live right down the road. I really want to buy from you. And I'm like, well, you can't because we're wholesale to the trade only, but you can buy from Pinelands Direct, and I'm like, just curious, before I give you the information, what are you looking for? And she said, Japanese barberry.
Oh gosh.
And I was, my soul cried. It shrunk a little bit, and they just cried because this is someone that wanted to buy from us. They were so bent on buying from us, and they don't even know what we do, or that what they wanted was wrong. And
that's how you create loyal customers. That's
but
going back to the Rudbeckia, it's a facultative plant, so it can live in some wetlands, but typically you find it half in wetlands, half in not. It can take some drier conditions. That's what we found as well. It grows to 2 to 3 feet tall. I've seen reports where it gets taller. I'm sure there's probably cultivars that get taller than that, but
I've
most
seen
of the time it's in that 2 to 3 foot range.
I'd say that's fair.
But one of the reasons why it's been up on our social media so much is because it has a super vibrant and long bloom time from like July to September. It'll bloom for a long time, and it's got a ton of blooms.
And it's got a stalk, which is good for cut flowers. Yep. So if you wanted to cut flowers, that one's much better than some of the other Rudbeckia for cut flowers.
And while not like we're privileged to have all our seed fields and have all the stuff blooming kind of next to each other, so you can see, oh well, compared to the Monarda punctata, there are nowhere near as many pollinators on this. There's still a ton of pollinators that are on the Rudbeckia fulgida too. We said I was out there today and saw all kinds of bees and monarchs and all kinds of stuff on it. So
but it's such a classic native flower that
it's the kind, and one of the reasons I included it because we have posted about it a ton on social media. And with these picks, I like to pick some more, I don't want to say obscure stuff, but stuff that's more outside the box and not what people are thinking. Yeah. One of the reasons I picked this one in particular this week was it's a great plant to have in your garden that people, when they come over, they're going to see it and say, ooh, I want one of those. And then you can tie them, oh, that's a native plant. And here's some other native plants. You can kind of use it as a conversation starter. Yeah. And like gateway drug is like we say.
Exactly. No, it's a great gateway plant. One thing we do have to do is start keeping a list of what we use,
because I could have sworn we used this within the last month.
It's becoming work at this point. I can't remember. We've done enough of these now that I don't remember.
And because we posted this on social media so much, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should do one of the eupatoriums. I'm like, I think Fran did one not too long ago. I was looking at viburnum dentatum, but I think we did that one.
I think we have too.
Yeah. Someone probably has a list someplace, and if you have that list and you can send it to us, we will give you I guess a t-shirt. Yeah. We have things that we can give away.
Yeah. Now. Okay. The funny thing is at this point, I feel like we've done everything.
Oh yeah.
like at this point, I'm like, didn't we do all of them? I don't know, but great choices.
Yeah.
Great choices.
Oh yeah. Some great plants to add to your native garden. If you're in the mid-Atlantic, that's and I should have said with the Rudbeckia fulgida, the New Jersey it's kind of a rare plant in New Jersey and PA. Like if you look at the Bonap map, and Bonap is Biota of North America project. we said it before, but I want to, if any new listeners, I want to remind you of that. That's what I use for a lot of my native ranges on stuff because it gives you a little bit more detail than USDA does. And but it tends to, it's much more common throughout the Midwest and Southeast. But New Jersey and PA seem to be its northern reach.
You'll find it here just because it's been planted here. That's a pretty common garden plant. Native, whether people realize it's a native or not, it's pretty commonly used, which I love.
So, well, moving on, let's get ready for this week's botany-based current events. And of course, it is a competition. Fran, you're frowning. I'm smiling. So let's move along to this or that.
You can get with this, or you can get with that.
All right. To much dismay, I have to announce a winner. And again, you've been on a roll, like 8-7. Now, it was close.
Now, last week I won because of a
rock, paper,
scissors. When I looked on the Facebook group just before we got on, it had us at 8-8.
Oh,
so this is a live thing, and I don't necessarily want to do rock, paper, scissors again.
All right. So,
and this may be an episode of bad podcasting.
All right. How about this? I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 5.
I had a different idea. I was going to say, do you want to bring our coworker Kelsey in to kind of just speak in the microphone and pick one of us?
Yeah. Hold on. I'll go get her.
All right. So this is unseen footage from ever happening before. We have never done this ever before. Brought a live guest on the phone. Oh, she's not here.
Teresa, do you have a moment?
So we're going with our backup now.
Okay.
And we can't even do the backup.
All right. Where's Kelsey at?
She's dropping paint off.
All right.
Okay. All right.
All right. It was a bad idea.
Yeah, have her not.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna put this on hold. Who the actual winner of last week or 2 weeks episode 65 was. We're gonna put that on hold.
2 weeks in a row. Actually, at one point I was up 5-0, and then you went up 8-5 like that. And I was like, man, I can't catch a break.
I think this is I think our listeners are kind of conspiring to do this to us.
Yeah, I think I do too. I do too.
In fact, I would say I know that they're conspiring to do this to us. I don't think it's
they don't want to pick. They want it to be a tie. And you know what? There's going to be a winner, whether they pick a winner or not. We're going to have a winner. There has to be.
Let's present this week's articles. And since we don't have a winner, we're just going to have you go first.
Okay. That's
and
fine.
then we'll do this week's. And when Kelsey gets here, then she will pick one for us live. Who won?
Perfect. And I kind of alluded to what mine was in the last episode with the Friends of High School Park. And the name of the article is Invasive Plants Are Still for Sale as Garden Ornamentals, Research Shows, by the University of Massachusetts Amherst on phys.org. Again, I've highlighted a few. This was actually a much larger article. I've highlighted a few passages just to get the point across. Results of a new study by ecologists at the University of Massachusetts Amherst show that 1,330 nurseries, garden centers, and online retailers are still offering hundreds of invasive plant species as ornamental garden plants. This includes 20 species that are illegal to grow or sell nationwide. The study in Invaders for Sale, the ongoing spread of invasive species by the plant trade industry, published in Frontiers in Ecology and Environment, shows that the existing regulatory or ethical guidelines do not serve to limit the widespread introduction of invasive plants, and that more than 60% of the 1,285 plants identified as invasive remain for sale. Once we've recognized that an ornamental plant can be invasive, we would hope that commercial sales of the species would stop, says lead author Evelyn M. Bury, a graduate student in organism. Or you got to help me there.
I'm letting you get through this on your own.
Organismic and evolutionary biology at UMass. But our findings show that our current framework for removing invasive plants from the plant trade isn't working. States are generally doing a good job limiting sales of their own regulated plants, but we found major inconsistencies in which what's being regulated across state borders. Nearly all states had at least one of their regulated plants sold in a neighboring state. Hold on.
We'll put it on pause.
I'll put it on pause. Kelsey, come in.
Yes, sir.
Come in and close the door.
I don't know if I approve of this.
You are live on air. This is our coworker Kelsey,
and you will have to talk in the microphone a little bit. So
I'm going to move over. So
I don't think I was asked this first.
Well, all right. So we.
Everything is going wrong today.
Everything's wrong today. You
don't look at the man behind the curtain. So
everything I've ever touched breaks.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't watching, Fran typically has a green screen behind him, which is no longer there.
It's been knocked over, so you can see what's really behind me. But so Tom and I, Kelsey doesn't listen to the podcast, so she has no idea.
I've heard like the first two.
All right, we're on number 67.
Well, before you guys came.
All right, so we do this or that where we each present an article, and then our listeners on our Facebook page vote for a winner. So last week or the last time it was a tie, and Tom and I did rock, paper, scissors to pick a winner.
In which I won.
You
and Tom won.
Really?
Tom won.
Wow.
Yeah. So, because I don't have practice against Tom, I couldn't get into his head on one rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, we're tied today,
We are tied today. So we want you to pick a winner, and there's no strategy. You just get to lean into the mic.
I was going to say what the articles were.
Okay.
And so Fran's article was.
Because this is almost unfair because I like Tom more than you.
I know.
Fran's article was that solar was emerging as a threat to farmland preservation.
Maybe we should have told her the articles without telling her who they were, who picked.
Okay, so the one article was that solar farms are a threat to farmland preservation.
Okay.
And then the better article, in my opinion, was that there was a bipartisan infrastructure bill that includes $250 million for invasive plant programs that just went through to
remove invasive plants. Yeah.
And that was part of that federal infrastructure bill that just got pushed through.
So federal money to remove invasive plants, or realizing that we're killing some of our best agricultural land. You as a farmer would understand that for solar fields.
I have to go with the solar fields as my choice because I hate solar panels because they're ruining all the farmland and all the environment. And I'm so against it.
So you're against renewable energy is what you're saying.
It takes so much energy to make those.
It really does.
It does. If you look at the research, what it takes to make those solar panels, it's doing so much damage.
Yeah.
And they're taking prime farmland, and you as a farmer realize how hard it is to get ideal farmland.
And all that good soil.
And you can't take it back.
Waste.
Yeah. So then that's what we discussed with your article last time, was that when you take that away, I guess what I should say is there's more expensive, but better places that are dual use, like parking lots, warehouse roofs, those kind of places. But it's already used. It's already impervious surface. Do it there.
They don't want to invest that money because they want to take the easy way. Hey, here's some flat land. I'm just going to put it here, and it's easy.
Right.
All right. That's it.
All right.
I win.
Good.
Good. No solar panels.
It was a little rocky, but this worked.
Too,
this live.
Next time we have to pick a winner, we don't say whose article is who.
Yeah.
We'll just say what the two articles are.
But that was yours, and I still picked it, so that didn't really matter.
I'm shocked. I'll bring you a coffee tomorrow.
Ooh.
Actually,
all right.
I have off tomorrow.
Thank you, Kelsey. Everyone give Kelsey a round of a hand, or round of applause, a round of a hand.
I'll take one hand. That's fine.
All right.
So, all right. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to pick to go first. All right. So I'll pick up where I left off. We've known for decades that many gardening and landscaping plants are invasive, adds Bethany Bradley, senior author and professor of environmental conservation at UMass, but we've done little to stop propagating, and we can do better. The most concerning case of federally designated noxious weed sales, Beery and colleagues say, is the availability of Congo grass, or Congan grass, which is Imperata cylindrica.
I was going to say, why are you even saying the common name? Just say the botanic.
Imperata cylindrica rubra, which is red barren grass, or Japanese blood grass is another common name for it. And I've known that plant's invasive since the mid 90s. It's offered by 33 vendors in 17 states and is labeled as one of the world's most invasive plants. This is tricky case, says Beery, because plant breeders are marketing a sterile cultivar, but research shows these plants are not completely sterile and can still become invasive. So this is something we've been saying for episodes and episodes. It's that we know they're invasive, they're banned, but growers want the money because they know they can sell it. Like I just said, someone called today asking for Japanese barberry. We know that's invasive.
Yeah.
Delaware has banned it. But yet
Pennsylvania just put it on an invasive list. And I was talking to a friend of ours today who we were talking about how that just got put on the list. And he's like, yeah, and they wanted to put calorie pear on too, but the fruit growers in Western PA protested against it because they use it to help pollinate.
Yeah, and like, that's it's crazy because they don't care. It's about business and money. It doesn't care what it does to the environment. So it's just ridiculous to me that these plants can still be, you know what, like anything else, start a task force, go into these places. Like I went into the Home Depot and Lowe's that are right by my house. They both have Japanese barberry and they both have burning bush. Yeah. Which shouldn't be. That means there's people growing it. They probably have it from there's multiple people growing it. We've known it's invasive, but it doesn't stop. And that's a lot of nurseries in a lot of states growing a lot of bad plants. Yeah. And that's what I was getting at last episode with the $250 million towards invasive plant removal. That's only putting a Band-Aid on it. We have to stop it on the front end, and it needs to stop, but it's not. So
yeah. And if you aren't aware of invasive plants, just walk through your local housing development and you'll see them all there, and then walk through your local patch of woods and you'll see them there too. And now you know where they're coming from. Yeah, exactly. It's they're just so common, and it's becomes part of the cookie cutter, which actually goes really well into my article as a great segue, because we don't necessarily want that cookie cutter. And my article was actually by one of our arch nemesises, Margaret Roach. Do you know who that is?
I do know who Margaret Roach is.
She's the host of another podcast called The Way to Garden.
Yeah, she's not a nemesis.
No, I'm just joking. She just really fantastic stuff.
We're gonna start throwing shade at Margaret Roach. Get a little ecology war going here.
And I'm sure many of you saw this article because it's getting shared all over the place. Came out in the New York Times just a week ago.
It's New York Times, so is it going to have a firewall? Do I sense a win?
So it did on my phone. If you go, this is part of my pitch here.
Okay.
I went on my phone, firewall. Go on my desktop, no firewall. So if at first you cannot open it, try a different browser.
If at first you can't open it, vote for Fran.
That reminds me of one of the best pieces of advice I forgot, and that's if at first you don't succeed, maybe skydiving isn't for you.
Oh, it's gonna be one of those episodes. All right, we gotta keep.
Anyway, so this just came out in the New York Times about a week ago, and it was called "Your Garden May Be Pretty, but Is It Ecologically Sound?" Like I said, by Margaret Roach, and she was profiling a lot of a fellow named Daryl Morrison, who she called an elder statesman of the ecological landscaping movement, and he offered a lot of advice that she then profiled in this article. And a lot of it was about merging ecology with design. And what one of the lines was, native plant communities provide the logical starting point for designing beautiful, functioning regional landscapes, Mr. Morrison writes, crediting the idea to the groundbreaking 1929 book by Edith A. Roberts and Elsa Raymond, I'm guessing. And that title of that book was American Plants for American Gardens, which a colleague introduced to him in the 60s. And he really... The main point I wanted to highlight from this, it's a very long article, a lot of good stuff. I recommend that if you haven't read it, go and read it, because it gives you a lot of more perspective about gardening with native plants. And but Morrison had 4 principles to design by, and I'll read them here. In his teaching, as in his own practice, Mr. Morrison keeps 4 goals in mind. The 4 characteristics of a successful landscape design. First, it must be ecologically or environmentally sound, meaning that it has a level of natural diversity that will provide resilience against climate change. His quote, the species in the landscape must be adapted to the site and region and hence not require a lot of support like watering or applying poisons to the earth, he said. It also means we do not introduce non-native invasives that will diminish the diversity. Second, a landscape must also be experientially rich beyond the visual dimension. This means considering the non-visual aspects, the feel of the wind, the aroma of the prairie dropseed. One aroma you probably don't want is Penstemon digitalis, because right now it smells like wet dog. But again, that creates an experience. When you smell that, you're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting smell, or wet viburnum leaves. They have an interesting smell, and it kind of creates a memory in a way. Where was I? He said the other forms of life too, the bees, the butterflies that move through it. Third, a design must likewise be of place, averting the fate conjured in a favorite quote, when you have the standardized landscapes with the same plants, all irrigated and on artificial support, there is no there, meaning there's no sense of place there. He said, borrowing from Gertrude Stein, a native landscape gives you a clue of where you are, and you should know if you're in Des Moines or Connecticut.
I think that's a fantastic point.
That was tying into your last article.
Yeah.
You go into a housing development, everyone's got the same plants.
Yeah.
It's I don't get it. Why so many people want to be different. They drive different cars. They want to have different clothes. They want to have the newest fashion. Have this stuff, and there's so much variety out there. You can have something completely different from your neighbor, be helping the environment, be helping the earth, and they can do the same thing, and they have their own differences, you know.
And a lot of people don't care. What's a shame is you go into some of these developments, it's what the contractor was able to get at a decent price from a local wholesaler, and just, you know, it's a package deal that they put in that some people just don't care, and they're fine with that. And
the last of his 4 tenets there was the landscape must be dynamic, changing over time. We spend all kinds of effort to keep our landscapes looking the same, mowed and clipped and unchanged. Mr. Morrison said, you are missing out by doing that, missing out on the change from one growing season to another and over time, which that is just such a magical portion, especially we have some listeners who've been sharing pictures of their meadows. Native meadows really change over the years. That first year is what's the phrase? It's first they creep, or first they sleep, then they creep, then they leap. Yeah. And I was going to say first you sow, then they grow, then you mow. I don't know. No, first they sleep, then they creep, then they leap. And it's that first year, you're not going to really have a lot of color. You'll get some good grasses, maybe some Rudbeckia, maybe some Monarda. The next year, that's when you're going to get a big burst of those like early successional forbs. Yeah. But that first year is a lot of grasses. Then you get your early successional forbs, and then over time, you're going to have things like Baptisia pop up, and some other species that take a little bit longer to germinate or a little bit slower to grow. And those meadows really change over a period of 10 years. If you took pictures each year, it would look like a different on the same day. It would look different year to year. Yeah. And that's a big part of the experience, is seeing things grow and seeing things mature. One of my favorite memories at our place in New York is I planted a bunch of white pines along the border, and I planted them when they were maybe 2 feet tall, and now they're like 15 or 16 feet tall. And it's just like, man, I remember planting those, and I remember each time coming back seeing they're a little bit taller. And it's a rewarding experience seeing those changes over time. I
love seeing the Atlantic white cedar hedgerow that we planted along the road, and how that's changed over time. It's wonderful to be a part of that growth. Yeah. So totally.
And like I said, there's a lot more in that article. That's just what I highlighted. Is really only a small section of it. But those were really, really impactful tenets that we've said much less eloquently on our podcast through the 67 episodes. But there's so many rewards to gardening with native plants, or just using native plants in any application. And it's more than rewarding for just us. There's rewards for our water, our wildlife, everything really. It's and rewarding down the line. Yeah. It doesn't just stop at our property line. No,
great article. I think both articles are great article. I don't know who I'd vote for if I were on the outside.
Just make sure to open it up on your browser, then you should be able to read it. You'll get a thing at the bottom saying to subscribe. But
just want to remind everyone, if you're a member of the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group, you can vote on your cell phone.
But you do have to be a member of the group to vote for this.
You do, and we've hit 500 members.
Yes, we have.
We've hit 500 members. Yeah, and it continues to be a wonderful, supportive environment, which I love to see. So thank you to everyone that's joined and continues to keep the environment that way.
Oh yeah,
so wonderful. So we'll have the vote. We'll make sure we have the vote up, or the poll up on Friday on Facebook group. Mm-hmm. Make sure you vote because,
and of course, the choice is yours.
So we're actually going to breeze through a few things. You want to do? We have no questions this week. We have no topic this week.
Well, I did kind of have a short topic. that I was going to surprise you with.
All right. Well, we'll get back to that. So we do that later. We do have, there's no complaints this week. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do listener shout outs. Once I can find the actual listener shout out drop.
Listener shout out.
So I've gone first the last two segments. Why don't you go?
Yeah. First. So my shout out this week was to Kathy Simon, who is a member of the Facebook group, and she put up a really nice post about one of my favorite places, and that's the Burlington County Agricultural Center.
Yeah,
and
that is a great destination.
Yeah, and so I've gone there for a lot of their farmers markets. They get a lot of the farmers from Burlington County and have a really great farmers market. They got live music, they got food there, all kinds of arts and crafts stuff, along with some great locally grown produce. And I've even sold some native plants there at their garden expo they had in the spring in past years. But they also have like a whole education series they do there, a lot of cooking stuff, a lot of gardening stuff, and but Kathy said that they want to do more there with native plants and stuff for bees, growing plants for bees and butterflies and that kind of stuff. So Fran, I saw you didn't volunteer to help, but I volunteered to help.
I was waiting for you to say I volunteered you.
I almost wrote Fran and I will help, but I'm like, I probably shouldn't. He's got a lot going on. I probably shouldn't throw him.
I don't know that I saw that post. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah. But and Kathy, if you need some more recommendations, I don't want to volunteer other people, but I can give you some other people. If you contact us, I can give you some other recommendations for people who would probably be better or at least more knowledgeable presenters than Fran and I would. So there's some great names that come to mind, but I don't want to say, oh yeah, they'll do it because I can't speak for them.
You know, I'm no longer a Burlington County resident.
That's true. Yeah.
Does that exclude me?
I don't think so. No. I think that means you have to do twice as much.
I'm not saying what county I am now a resident of, so I don't get pulled in there.
Yeah.
So my pick for listener shout out is Phil Perhamus of Woods. And, you know, Phil has been a customer of ours throughout the years, and he had reached out to me last week about land that they're managing in northern New Jersey, and mentioned they were looking at investing in aggressive natives to outcompete some of the invasives that they've been dealing with, because it's a smaller staff and it's a lot to deal with. And that's where I got the idea for my plant that's hot. So, you know, and Phil and I had an email exchange back and forth. And then afterwards he was like, you know, I should mention I listened to the podcast. I've been a listener. I started from the beginning, and I'm only, you know, I think said he was at mid-July, so he's probably caught up at this point.
Yeah.
And that another one of our listeners and former guests had referred the podcast to him, and he's been loving it and said that he felt that we were doing a great job. So we really appreciate the feedback. It was unsolicited, and thank you so much. And it's great that it's one of our customers too, that we get to have the interaction with, and it's sparking more conversation kind of flowing over to the podcast. So, Phil, thank you. That was wonderful. We really appreciate that. So too great.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there were so many people to pick from.
It's getting harder and harder to pick.
It is. That's why we have to have more and more podcasts so that we can keep doing listener shout outs. So, so you said you had a surprise topic.
So you did so well with my spur of the moment question at the beginning of our last episode on why I was your best friend, which you did not answer the way I was expecting.
No, actually, you know what? I thought about that afterwards, and I was like, you know, it's funny because if someone were to have asked me that off the podcast, I would have said, I think it was the phrase, I would have said Agatha's my best friend.
I was just saying, maybe say your fiance.
Yeah, my fiance. Agatha's my best friend. And she would say, I'm her best friend. But I think that's a given. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's in a relationship, that's the way it should be. I'm sure Melissa's your best friend.
Oh, yeah.
And she would say the same about you. So I just felt like that was a given. And I went, because you were like, say why I'm your best friend. Yeah. So I was like, no, who would? Then I started thinking, I'm like, who would I say is my best friend? Because that's not something.
Yeah, it was really just supposed to be like you were supposed to say, oh, you would be better of a friend if you supplied more alcoholic drinks. That was what the answer was. It was supposed to be. But I wasn't discussed it before. But
you know, the question completely caught me off guard, and I didn't know how to answer.
Yeah. So I have another question for you.
All right, here we go off track. You got a drink for me?
Definitely not going to no drink. But it's what? Well, originally it was going to be, what podcast do you listen to? But I might change it a little bit and say, what are some places you go to relax? Not necessarily go away, but like go to relax, go to clear your mind, go to learn, those kind of things. That's the answer I'm more looking for.
All right. Podcasts, you might be surprised that I don't really listen to any industry podcasts because I kind of, when I listen to podcasts, I'm trying to, I think, get a break from it. Not saying that I distance myself from it or I don't like it. It's a part of it and I do listen to them, but like I tend to listen to comedy podcasts. Like I'm not a true crime person or that, like, probably my number one podcast is Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend because I like some of those interviews where people are having real conversations. It's not a 5-minute interview where they're pushing something. I like when you get to learn something about the industry and the person themselves. So believe it or not, like little not secret, but like one of my favorite shows, I know this is going to sound absurd, is the Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin on the WWE network, because as a kid he has on all these wrestlers that I watched as a kid talking about what life was like as a wrestler and the dichotomy of people not wanting people to know who they really were, because back then you kept that hidden, because if you were healed, you wanted them to think you were a bad person. So it was like, or the injuries that they worked through. I kind of enjoy like when they peel back the curtain and you get to, but anyway, places that I relax. I'd say my number one is my backyard, which is like I get lost. Like I can go out there and I can sit and relax, or I notice something different every time I'm out there, and I can do work and just kind of I get lost. It becomes another world to me. So my backyard actually butts up to a natural area, and you start noticing the wildlife, and we've been planting native plants over the last couple of years. So what's it? We finally got hummingbirds on our cardinal flower, and that was a huge deal for us. So that is a big one. But beyond that, like Agatha and I like to do a lot of hikes. There's a place in South Jersey called Blueberry Hill that we like to visit a lot. Like that's one of our go-to places. Like let's go to Blueberry Hill and take a hike. So Cedar Run is another one that we go to a lot, that we walk, we might talk a little bit, but we just kind of go and chill out and just I really find that connection with nature is something that's been lost over time, that I'm just really finding again, that's where I feel at home. Like that's where I go to relax. So how about you? Did I answer that the way you want?
No, okay. Definitely. No, so I listen to a bunch of podcasts. It's probably one of my flaws, to be honest, is I feel like if I'm not listening, like I really don't even listen that much music anymore, because it's so much time is spent listening to podcasts, because I learn so much. And it's like, okay, I'm washing the dishes or I'm mowing the lawn, but I'm also doing this and learning. And that's why I started listening to some audiobooks too. But one of the ones I listen to a lot of the Meat Eater Network podcasts, because it's more, there's a lot going to, it's not just like hunting and fishing stuff. It's like legislation and things to look out for that way. There's a lot of like ethics and environmental ethics that is tied into it. There's some fun stuff too, but
do you feel like part of the reason that I don't listen to a lot of industry podcasts is because I don't want to be influenced, because I feel like if I listen and hear what other people are doing, I'm going to either want to try to incorporate it. Like you can subconsciously copy it.
Oh yeah.
And I try to distance myself because I don't want to know what they're doing, because I kind of feel like this is in a bubble and we're creating it without that influence. And I'm afraid to let it creep in. But I do listen. Like I listen to Darren's podcast. They're just not as frequent as some of the other podcasts.
Yeah. And I honestly, I don't listen to a lot of industry podcasts regularly.
Yeah.
It's more like, oh, my regular slate's done. I need something to listen to. I got extra stuff going on. I've listened to a bunch of Darren's podcasts. That's Growing with Nature. Yeah. I've listened to Backyard Ecology, which actually Russ Fenari, I'd heard about it and I didn't recognize the person. Russ Fenari, former guest, had told me, oh yeah, I've been listening to this and I really like it. So I've listened to a handful of those, and I listened to probably the most out of all is the Native Plant podcast with also former guest John McGee.
Yeah, I do listen to In Defense of Plants.
Yeah,
but I
In Defense of
really
Plants every once in a while
through to find something that is in my palette. Then
exactly. I pick out the ones that are really sound interesting to me. A podcast I'd recommend that I listen to a little bit more is called Land and Legacy, and it's wildlife focused, but so much of it. The reason I listened to it is because I saw Dr. Dwayne Estes from Southeastern Grasslands Initiative on LinkedIn. He put up that he was on it, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I listened to that episode, which is the reason we have our podcast. I've said that before because I'm like, oh, why the heck aren't we doing this? Yeah. And then I kept listening to their episodes because I'm like, oh, there's a lot of cool stuff here. They had a guy from Pure Air Native Seed on there, which we had a relationship. I knew some of the people there, and just kind of I kept listening because there's so much about habitat management, and so much of what they're saying just boils down to native plants, and talking about ideas. I'm like, oh man, that's something we could talk, like kind of, they're talking about it from a wildlife perspective. We can talk about it from a garden perspective and kind of do the same thing, but it's a really good idea. Just reframe it for how we're talking about things. So I've really learned a lot. If you have a little bit more property and want to do some land management, that's a good one to get started, because they talk about how to safely use fire, how to safely cut down trees and thin brush and get rid of invasives. They talk a lot about that.
Awesome.
Again, from a wildlife perspective, we're trying to build wildlife habitat, but wildlife habitat is great pollinator habitat, great native habitats in a lot of cases, and that's their main framework.
Awesome.
Some of the other ones that are more for pleasure is I listened to a podcast called The Daily Dad, which is a sister, I don't want to say sister podcast, but they have another one called The Daily Stoic, which is like 3 minutes a day. It's just like a quick meditation that's taken from the Stoics and
very cool.
Or some of the great literary people from our past, and just quick little stories about how to raise your kids, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I always like that the way I heard it with Mike Rowe. That's some just really thought-provoking stories. Now he expands on them a little bit more.
What I like about that one is some of them are really short. So if you only have 15 or 20 minutes, you can listen to one and get through it. Another one I did mention that I like to listen to is Working It Out with Mike Birbiglia, who's a comedian, but they kind of let you in on the writing process of their jokes, and he'll have a guest on and they'll throw some bits that they're working on for their upcoming specials, and they give each other advice on how to tweak it or make it better, or if it doesn't work, or if it works and why. So I kind of, again, it's one of those behind the scenes stuff. Like I like to know how things work.
Yeah.
Like I like to dissect it, and I like when they kind of let you in on that process.
Yeah. But there's so much other stuff out there that I like just kind of glance at. Or another one I listen to when I have enough time to is one we've talked about a bunch called Completely Arbitrary.
Yeah.
Which that's a lot of fun. The first time I listened to them, these guys are off the wall. These guys are crazy. I don't know if I like this. But the more I listen to it, coming from the native plant lens, I'm like, oh, why the hell are they talking about all this non-native stuff? Yeah. But when I started listening to it, they have an episode on calorie parrot talking about how bad calorie parrot is. And they have an episode on arborvitaes talking about how much they don't like arborvitaes. And but that's a really neat matchup with the one of the co-hosts doesn't know anything about trees, and the other one is an arborist for I think the city of Portland.
And I was gonna say they're West Coast based.
Yeah.
So
but I listen to a ton of podcasts, and those are some of the ones I listen to. I wish there was more on YouTube about native plants. Yeah. Not that I'm not obsessed with native plants. I just love the crossover with my other hobbies, with getting outside, with hunting, with fishing, with those kind of things. That's where a lot of my stuff falls. I know what's it called? The guy always pronounces his last name wrong. Kyle. I don't know if it's Lieberger or Lieberger. Yeah. It's one of the two. Someone I want to have on our podcast soon, but his TikTok is freaking, he has like 90,000 followers. Wow. It's insane, but he's a great resource for information too, especially in the Southeast. And he's putting a lot of it on Facebook now too, which is great for people who don't use TikTok like me.
I have to tell you, one of my favorite podcasts of all time, which was just a limited series, was one that you told me about, knowing that I'm a music fan.
Oh yeah.
Was Winds of Change.
Yeah, that was a cool one.
Which was based on, did the FBI or the CIA write the song Winds of Change for the Scorpion in order to bring down communism?
Yeah.
And, I actually had a tie in that story. That could be another secret for another day, but I had a tie in that story because they talk about this massive drug bust in the late 80s.
And Fran was in the middle of it.
No, well, my girlfriend's father at the time was.
You don't want to ruin the secret yet.
was part of that bust, but it's. It's like, oh, I actually know about this because of this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, wow, I have a tie to this story. So
yeah, that was one I listened to it, and then I recommended it to Fran, and then like I'd come into work every day and say, hey, Fran, did you listen to this yet? And he'd be like, I'm like 20 minutes in. Well, you got to finish it so we can talk about it.
Yeah, no, it was a great one. It was a great one. So how about places that you go? Where do you like to go to relax?
Places I go, honestly, this is a bad answer, but on my lawnmower, I really relax on there. And a lot of it is like thinking, oh yeah, I could put this grass I just mowed. I could put native plants here.
Yeah.
I could expand my garden, which I don't need to expand my garden yet. I need to get my current garden a little bit more under control and a little less wild and full of things I don't want there. But doing that, I've been enjoying my backyard a lot lately.
Yeah. That's my place of refuge. It really is.
Oh yeah. I love going to our place up in upstate New York in the Adirondacks. That's just a little bit more wild and a little bit more, although you do see some invasive plants there too.
But that is a great spot.
And then as a kid, we always took family vacations up to Maine, like way, way up north in Maine. And I haven't been in a handful of years now.
But your family just
went. And my parents just went. And we're looking at going back next year. I'm interested in going back to a lot of these places I haven't been in a long time. Now that I have more of an ecological frame of mind, that was one of the things growing up. There's trees, there's frogs, there's all this stuff, but I didn't understand as much, and I wasn't as interested in as much as I am now. So now it's like, oh, this is this mushroom, and that's why it's important, or this is this tree, and that's why it's important.
That would be very.
Where
cool.
Before it's just like, oh yeah, I'm walking around looking at.
But then you get to the forest. You get to introduce Graham to all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Awesome. So I think, hey, that was a great spur of the moment topic. Oh yeah. We should do that more often. I like there's no preparation. It's not always going to work out that's good.
No, definitely not. But no, it's something that was one of when we first started the Buzz episodes. That was originally they were going to be a little bit shorter and be like, oh yeah, here's top 10 websites to go on to learn about native plants. Here's top 10 books to read. I think that was our first one, books to read. And one of them was going to be podcasts to listen to other than ours. So that was I was like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to do something like this, kind of talk about other things we listen to, whether it's plant related or not, but
that was awesome because we did talk about some plant related stuff, some just some things that we enjoy to kind of get away from. Sometimes I just need things that gets my brain to stop working. And I guess that's the best way to put it. Like, how do you shut your brain off? And some of these things, if I'm doing industry related, my brain's not shutting off. So speaking of books and specifically audiobooks, I did not come up with a theme music for Grow Read a Book, but I do have a book that I want to briefly talk about this week. I listened to this one about probably 2 months ago now, so not everything's coming to mind as fast as it once was. But I mentioned it the last time we talked about this, and that was a book called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. Okay.
And he's Swedish, Finnish.
I don't know.
Some Scandinavian, I'll put it that way. And he was an arborist in Scandinavia. And he always researched or looked at the trees, but then he really started to research the trees and read other people's research about trees, and wrote a book about explaining a lot of these complex relationships between trees. Not just like a hemlock tree and another hemlock tree, but how a hemlock might interact with something in the understory and those kind of things, and even fungal relationships. And it's a really interesting read or listen, because he goes into some of those really complex relationships and the research behind them and how they're finding out, well, a lot of times trees will even help each other because they're all really connected at the roots. They're not physically connected, but the roots are touching and they'll actually share energy sometimes. And there was a example that he put in there about how some trees in Africa, when a giraffe starts to eat on them, will start to send like a bitter taste to their leaves at the speed of water, which is like a third of an inch a minute or something like that. But it'll use the water and send that bitter taste so the giraffe will stop eating it. Meanwhile, they're actually sending something through the roots to the other trees around it, kind of notify it that the giraffe is eating it, and to also send out that bitter taste.
Wow.
And
that's what turf grass does too, right? The smell of fresh cut lawn is a defense mechanism. Like, hey, there's danger coming.
Yeah. And even how sometimes like they can summon insects to attack other insects and let other plants know that they're being attacked by insects, all kinds of stuff like that. The one turn off for me, and it's more of a me thing. A lot of people probably really into it, but it's a turn off for me, is there was so much anthropomorphism in it.
Okay.
And how like trees love and trees feel and all that stuff. And I'm like, I get what you're trying to say, but they don't do it the same way we do it.
Yeah.
There's different coding there. They are doing these things, but it's not out of love. It's not out of caring. It's for other
survival.
Yeah. It's other things going on. It's not like they don't have complex brains. So and that was like it starts off so much like that. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like this book.
Open up your heart, Tom.
Yeah.
Open up your heart. Let the love in.
I don't know. I guess I like scientific writing better, but it was just, it was very anthropomorphic and very touchy feely from the get go. And it just gave me the entire time. I'm like, okay, this is, oh, that's interesting, but how much of it is true? How much is not? I think a lot of it is actually real, but
this is a book that's on my reading list. I just haven't gotten to. I'm hoping as things calm down for me over the next couple of weeks that maybe this is one.
No, it was very good. A lot of really great information. I wish I remembered more examples right now, but it's something I would recommend other people listen to, especially if you don't get turned off by that anthropomorphism of plants and animals.
Awesome.
Because then you'll really get way more out of it than I did, because I just felt skeptical the entire time I was listening. But no, there's a lot of really interesting studies that were referenced in there.
Well, now that I have a longer commute to work, maybe I'll try the audiobooks.
Yeah. Even talked about invasive plants in there, I think.
Really?
If I'm remembering properly. Yeah. So.
All right. Awesome. That's a great summary of that. That's definitely, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm interested. You want to do a pod deck?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let me see what we got here.
Fran is opening up the deck, or it's already open. He's cracking doing a quick shuffle.
Let me see.
Let's see your bridge.
I'll mess it because I have them what we've done on the other side. Discuss a trending topic. I don't want to get political.
Yeah.
Discuss the history of your industry.
Oh, that's a really interesting one.
Can we do it in 5 minutes or less?
I think so.
Because we're at about 50 minutes, like around there. Because maybe if we could do it in 5 minutes, we can keep this. I
could do trending topic a lot faster than 5 minutes, but
you know, I know when we had on your mother and father, and they talked about starting this nursery, he mentioned your father, Don Knezick, mentioned Ed Garbish, who started Environmental Concern. And realistically, I think he was the founding father of ecological nurseries. He started Environmental Concern down in St. Michael, Maryland, and was really one of the founders of growing salt marsh species and why it needed to be done. And I think a lot of our customers worked for Ed.
Yeah.
Like some of our customers, that's a lot of people started there and kind of found their way into the industry and created their own path. But I would have to say there's other people too. Like I know Jim Plyler at Natural Landscapes. I mean, he was one of those people that walked around the woods of North Carolina looking for rhododendron species that were native, that were hard to find, and tried to bring them into the regular trade. And and a lot of our customers started off with Jim too, and it's kind of, and that spawned the whole next generation of the Knezicks, the Jim McKenzie's, the Joe Barley's at Clear Ridge. And then I think from there, as it kind of grew, then you have Greenbelt Native Nursery and Carl Alderson, I think was part of getting that started. Maybe and it's kind of from there, it really branches out and gets, you had Ernst Conservation on the seed end, which were really pioneer.
Yeah. And it's, so what's interesting, always been interesting to me is we talk about environmental concern and then Pinelands Nursery. So Pinelands Nursery, we mentioned before, started in 1984.
Yeah.
And environmental concern was founded shortly before that. But you look at some of these other native nurseries or some nurseries or seed producers, and then when they switched to natives, it was all around the same time. Like there's a lot of the ones in the Midwest. I remember the one started in like 1978. You look at Hoffman, not that they're a true native nursery, but they do a lot of ecological focused plants.
Yeah.
Well, they were founded in, I think, 1984, 1985, 1986 range.
There was a lot of people starting right around the same time in different parts of the country.
Prairie Nursery was like it was actually older than that because it was Neil DeBole there. He took over. I think I heard the story. I can't remember where. It was another podcast. I heard his story, but he bought it from the previous owner in 1978 or something like that. So a lot of them started all around the same time.
Even Princeton nurseries, their love was native flora. We probably did more B&B straight species natives than anyone else, and all the cultivars came from that. Now we did non-natives too, but we probably did more than anyone else at the time when it came to that. So there were a lot of people that had that focus, but maybe weren't a restoration nursery. And a lot of that, some of those names are gone, and there's a lot of new ones. But back then, I think when the industry started, it was for the love of natives and restoration, and now it's an opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, one of the things I think is actually a newer part of it is the retail garden centers now, the native focused retail end of things. That wasn't, we've said it before, when my parents started the nursery, that wasn't even a thing. There was no one doing native retail, at least on a large scale, or even a medium scale, or even probably even a small scale, maybe an extra small scale. There were some people doing it, but it's really just kind of blown up. And now there's what, 5 to 10 just in New Jersey that I can remember. There's probably even more than that. And no matter where you are, there's something out there within a few hours. And sometimes they're not always, they're still pretty small, so they're not always the easiest to find, but a lot of them are out there.
But to me, that's the future. They're the ones spreading the good message on why and what and how, not just here's a native that you can find more on a consistent basis. It's people living the lifestyle, explaining, they're growing the circle customer by customer, which is what we asked for. We just need some of those to become larger so that circle can get larger. We need more. We just need more. So I think that was 5 minutes of the beginning of our industry. How's that?
Very good. I thought you were going to take it back to like the beginning of horticulture.
No,
all of that kind of
stuff. I did. We said 5 minutes, so I did the abridged version.
Yeah.
So I think we did good.
Oh yeah.
We're just under an hour.
Perfect. So with that, we are wrapping it up. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to The Buzz. Thank you everyone for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
We're giving a big thank you to RJ Comer for our Buzz theme music. Make sure you stream or buy RJ's music on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you consume your music. Follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, or Native Plants _Healthy Planet, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. This is the first episode in a while we didn't have any phone calls, so don't forget about the question and comment line at 215-346-6189. Call, ask a question, or leave a comment. We'll play it on a future episode of The Buzz, and we'll answer your question, or we'll do a phone a friend, or try to respond to your comment. And congratulations on 500 members of the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. Keep growing that circle and keep the conversation going there.
Definitely. That has been like a joy. I haven't been as active as I want to be lately, but it's awesome just poking my head in, seeing everything that's going on. I'm like, oh, this is in good hands.
Oh, totally. Like I feel the same way. Like I feel like I don't want to consistently butt in and keep answering, because I'm really enjoying the direction in which it's going. I feel I'm more of a hindrance at this point.
So we now have shirts, and those shirts are going directly towards conservation. And And so super, super important for that you look at those shirts. I got sidetracked in my own brain there. It's not super important that you get yourself a shirt, but it goes to a super important cause, and that is giving back to a lot of these really great organizations that are doing awesome work. We're about to hit our $500 first goal for our first round of donations, and we're probably going to be doing that. I'm going to guess by the next episode. We need
that's awesome.
More shirts to be purchased there.
I'm really excited about that.
So you can find those if you go to our website, which is www.nativeplants.healthyplanet.com. You can find that banner at the top that says T-shirts here. Click on that, and it'll take you to our Teespring store. Again, all that money is going to. Or we have a dog attacking.
And we have a new member of the family attacking the door now.
So all that money is going to, or all the profits we generate from that are going to donations to a lot of these organizations that are doing awesome work that we're having on the podcast. You can listen to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast directly at www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. You can also check us out at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you consume your podcast. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share this with a friend. It really, really helps. And as always, you can always ask Alexa, just like I do, to play the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast. And while you're doing the dishes, while you're taking care of the kids, have it play in the background.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You can consume the things that we are saying today. So who's ready for today's secret?
It's my turn this week.
It is, and you started your secret, unless you have a different secret.
I do. We have to go back a couple episodes to my secret about how my parents changed my telephone number and didn't tell me. You brought that up. I think,
yeah.
2 episodes ago. So I was thinking about it. I was either in 8th or 9th grade. So you're looking at like 13 or 14 years old. And I was at school. I remember I was in junior high at the time. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, what's your new telephone number?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Hey, I called you and it said your phone was disconnected." And I was like, "What? Get out of here." And I'm like, "My phone's not disconnected. Phone calls are coming in. I've made phone calls. The phone's not disconnected." They're like, "Well, then you have to have gotten a new number." I'm like, "I'm telling you, like, phone calls are coming in." And then another friend mentioned, he's like, "I tried to call you too, and it said your number was disconnected." So on the way home, when I got off the bus, I went home with my friend Brian and tried to call my house from Brian's house, and it said the phone was disconnected. So I went home, and at dinner, I was like, "Do we have a new phone number?" And my parents are like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "No, you've heard the phone ring." And I'm like, "But I went to Brian's house and called the house, and it said the phone number was disconnected." And they looked at each other and like, "Oh, we were hoping we're like 2 months and you didn't figure it out." Now I'm like, 2 months. I was like, what's going on? And they're like, "We got tired of all the phone calls you get." So, and I'm like, "Well, how many could I get?" I didn't even realize for 2 months I wasn't getting them. I grew up in a big development. There were probably 40 kids on my street. Like, you didn't call, you just went outside. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I looked at my sisters. I have 2 older sisters. I'm like, "Did you know we have a new number?" They're like, "Oh yeah, we knew." So I was the only one. Like, never did the thought occur, hey, if he's in an accident and the hospital needs to get in touch with us, he should have the home telephone. No concern. Didn't tell me. They were hoping I would never figure out that we had a new telephone. I wonder how many people I'd given the telephone number to.
Yeah.
That just thought I gave them a bad phone number at that point. So it was that's a little insight to what my upbringing was like. So for a good 2 months, I had no idea that my family got a brand new telephone number and decided not to share it with me. Do you remember your house phone number as a kid?
I do. Should I repeat it right now?
Yeah, I remember both of mine, the one before they changed it and the one after. So
and one last thing, I meant to bring this up earlier, but if anyone is still listening, another call to action we did a couple months ago with the Great American Outdoor Act.
Yeah.
There's another act actually coming up right now, which is called the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, also known as RAWA. And that's something you should contact Congress about and say that you support it, because it is providing, I think it's like $1 billion a year or something towards habitat conservation, public land, those kind of things, creating places for our wildlife to live. So nothing but good things there. So that's something a lot of people think when it comes to a lot of this political stuff, it's like, someone else will call. They understand that's important, but sometimes if they don't hear from you, they don't realize how important it is. Call, write in, let them know that you think that's something important. Well, first read the bill, read what they're proposing, and make sure it's something you support, and then write to them.
Because I'm sure the people that don't support it are reaching out and saying you're going to get more of that, so they need to hear the positive support.
Exactly.
So make sure you do that.
Yeah. So something really, really important, and we'll definitely talk about in the future as it continues to work its way through Congress. So. Awesome. With that, I'm not everyone. Oh, nor am I.
Not today.
Nor am I, Fran. Thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next episode. I don't even know what it is, if it's a rooted discussion or a meet the guest.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a meet the guest with Sam Hoadley from Mount Cuba Center.
Oh,
and he's in charge of their trial gardens.
Oh, this is going to be a great one. So you'll see us next week or hear us next week, either or, for a meet the guest. And until then, keep it native.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.